Aimer back with another Mission Impossible episode review, continuing to take advantage of the wonderful long weekend that we have here in Canada. So this time I'm doing Season 4, Episode 20, which is called Terror. We start with Jim heading out in a white convertible again, and he goes into a roadside car's glove compartment. The mission: terrorist Ismet El Kabir is about to be pardoned by propaganda minister Ahmad Vassier of Surak, and the IMF must prevent his release to maintain stability in the region. This one is a straight A-team episode, in more ways than one, as you'll see. No female agent, so no dossier scene. There's a brief apartment scene, and then off we go to Surak, where we start with Soldier Willie getting help from fellow soldiers who come by in an explosives truck, needing car help, so that Barney can sneak into the explosives truck and commandeer it by making it appear that it's about to blow. Jim and Paris pick up the unlucky duo and head over to the prison where Kabir is being held. They are portraying officers who are returning from a special mission. They question Kabir about the theft as they believe he masterminded it, planting a bug in his cell. Barney heads to a cafe run by Kabir's girlfriend, Athena. Barney tells her that he hijacked the truck and he wants to help Kabir, showing her the truck's license plate as proof that he has it. Barney's ID shows that he's a demolitions expert from the army and offers to sell Athena the dynamite, earning a beating from her henchman Janab because Athena doesn't really feel like paying for it. Vassier arrives at the prison and says that Jim is not Captain Lewis as he claims, as Captain Lewis is on foreign assignment to find out how other nations feel about Kabir being released. Jim dodges it by saying he finished the assignment early and has returned. Paris, as Major Solti, who went along with Captain Lewis, joins the conversation and tells Vassier that other governments aren't thrilled about Kabir being freed, and he believes that Kabir plans to escape, which makes no sense to Vassier as he's being released the next day. Paris thinks he's doing it to thumb his nose at the government. Vassier is still incredulous, and Jim and Paris reveal to prison warden Marek that proof has surfaced that Vassier is in league with the terrorists, and Jim says he wants to be put into a cell near Kabir to see what can be found out. Vassier visits Kabir in his cell and asks him to just pretend to be grateful for his release for the press to be satisfied. And at the least, don't try to escape. Kabir relishes his role as a prisoner and as a hero to the people, so he tells Vassier he has no intention to escape. But of course, who's believing who at this point? Paris prepares a Vassier mask and heads to the cafe to see Athena, sharing a look with Barney as he is taken away so they can have a private conversation. He tells Athena that despite his best efforts, Kabir will be executed, and he needs to be busted out, telling Athena and Janab about the ancient underground aqueduct that leads to the prison. Athena decides to pay Barney for the dynamite, but he says that for their plan, they're going to need a stronger explosive such as nitroglycerin, which will have to be dangerously extracted from the dynamite. Off they all head to the IMF warehouse where they join Willie and start the process, which Athena demands to continue even through a raging thunderstorm which risks setting off the explosives. In the prison, Jim sends Kabir messages telling him that Paris as Sulti bugged his cell, which Kabir confirms and turns off the bug. Jim tells him that Vassier put him in the cell as a messenger, and that Kabir will be executed because the army is afraid of him. Paris' Sulti will make it look like Kabir died as a coward rather than a hero, and that Vassier could not tell him before because of the bug. Paris' Sulti comes to inspect the cell, so Kabir puts the battery back in. Barney, Willie, and Athena's crew get into the aqueduct and head towards the wall to Kabir's cell as Athena visits him in the prison. Kabir removes the battery from the bug, and Athena tells him about their plan to break the wall at 9 a.m., confirming the story that Paris as Vassier told her, and then joining the crew in the aqueduct shortly before go time. The real Vassier arrives at the prison shortly before 9 a.m. and demands that Kabir be released immediately. Paris stalls for time by saying they should at least hear from Jim if he's learned anything, and he starts to tell the story, but Kabir cuts him short and tells Marek to bring Kabir up. The explosion happens just as Marek opens the cell. Barney sets off another blast to close the tunnel behind them as the soldiers arrive. Jim mentions a cave, figuring that's where they'll head. A showdown develops. The soldiers are stationed outside the cave as Kabir and the crew come out. Willie allows himself to be knocked out so that Kabir can grab the bottle of remaining nitro, threatening the soldiers with it. Vassier urges him to stop, but of course by this point Kabir doesn't believe anything anyone says. Paris says he's bluffing, so Kabir throws the bottle, which turns out to be harmless. Kabir is shot, the others forced to surrender. Paris says he wants to take Barney and Willie as they are army deserters, and the IMF make their escape, with Willie confirming that the real Nitro was disposed of safely. Mission accomplished. I'm going to give this episode a grade of a D+. I had it rated much higher. And again, I think in looking back at my previous review, my previous thoughts, I remember thinking about this episode and looking at what is good about it, which is the fact that there is an absolutely fabulous guest cast here. Like, this is a who's who of character actors from, the turn of the decade between the 60s and the 70s. We have Michael Talon, who's already been in some episodes, and he's been great. We have David Opatoshu as Vassier. Talon played El Kabir, of course. Opatoshu as Vassier is really good. We have Arlene Martel as Athena. We have Ronald Feinberg, who is a guest in many, many episodes and will be coming up in future seasons. And again, like I said, what a fabulous cast. The counterpoint to that is, boy, they're really, really kind of wasted here. Tremendous actors and actress. But, the characters really, really, really leave a fair bit to be desired. The fundamental flaw in this episode is those 8 words that you never want to hear. It's not that anybody is necessarily lame or schmucks or unengaging, but I don't really care what happens to these people. There's nothing here that really, really makes me care about them. Also, part and parcel of it, it kind of all ties together here. One of the reasons that I think that it's very, very difficult for me, and I think most people watching this episode would probably, hopefully, share the same. If you disagree, I'd love to hear why. A couple of other things that kind of go hand in hand with the not caring. One reason is that nothing seems to go wrong at all for the IMF here. There's not even really a like one of those contrived moments, other than at the very end with Kabir picking up what seems to be a bottle of nitroglycerin, which would probably put everybody at risk. Even that doesn't really seem like anything to worry about. Like I certainly wasn't saying to myself, "Oh my gosh," even though I knew, everybody knows at the end, the IMF is going to, live to be in another episode. It just doesn't work. The whole thing just kind of goes rat-a-tat-tat, and that is not the sign of a good episode. It also seems pretty clear to me that the IMF expected that Kabir was going to be shot. And I've mentioned before that, when such a plan or in such a plot where that seems unavoidable, I tend not to like those plots so much because, the IMF is supposed to be an elite force that is supposed to be able to find ways around such things and find better ways to get things done rather than just having a guy get offed. No style points here, that's for sure. Another thing that is a problem, going hand in hand as to why I can't really care about these characters. I can't really care very much about this plot. I was going to say that the plot was convoluted, but I don't even think that convoluted is the right word. Other words that I think are more appropriate for this plot, one of them is definitely lackluster. There's nothing here there's nothing here to write home about. It's also rather disjointed and confusing. It reminds me of some other episode. The one that comes to my mind is Operation Heart back in season 2, where, in that episode there was a fellow who had a weak heart, and, there was this kind of conflicting thing about one character saying, well, I need to keep him alive, and no, now I don't really care if he lives, but no, wait a minute, I got to keep him alive now because, there's other things going on. And here, again, there's so much going on with that about, Kabir's going to be released, Kabir's going to escape, Kabir's going to be hanged. it's just so all over the place. And if you think about it, you can piece it together, as I kind of had to do in order to do the recap, and you can make sense out of it. But that's not why you watch an episode of television. You watch it to be entertained, and that's not really happening here. There's too much thought that has to go in this episode for anybody to try and kind of make sense out of it and follow it. That's what I feel. Another big reason for that is the fact that we have multiple competing antagonists. And I've mentioned this in other episodes. The one that I remember was in season 2 called Trek. I know that there was at least one other one where I pointed that out. I can't remember exactly which episode that was right now. But when you have a guy that you're going after, like Kabir, a quote-unquote bad guy, an antagonist, but you also have a competing antagonist in Vassier, who you also have to kind of work, and is also, sort of a bad guy for the purposes of this plot. It becomes increasingly difficult, and that's where a lot of this, confusion comes from as part of the plot. Because, who are we really supposed to be rooting against? We can root against both of them, but that typically is not what we like to do in a Mission Impossible episode. We want to have one guy to root against, one guy that we can point at and say, yeah, that's the antagonist. Or even if there are multiple antagonists, at least they should be working together, not kind of against each other, but then working together, and each having their own motivations. It's okay if they have their individual goals, but having different motivations about what they're doing can be problematic. And this is a perfect example of that, because that's where the disjointment, if that's the right word, and the confusion in this plot comes from. And that's a key reason why, basically, despite the fabulous cast, it's just really kind of a waste of a plot and a waste of an episode. It just doesn't really come off well for me. And that's why I'm going to go with a grade of a D+, as I have. So, not a very long review for this one. I've said what needed to be said. Thank you all for watching. Please like this review. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And please leave your comments. What you thought about this episode. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.